speeches are like white elephant parties, right? Like you can walk in and there's gifts wrapped and all things considered, you don't really know what's behind them. You're not going to pick an ugly gift. You'll pick one that's nicely wrapped. And that's really what a title is for a speech. And I think that people are way too coy and cute about their titles. You want to think the whole time, like, what are people Googling at 3 a.m. when they can't sleep about the thing that they need to know about, right? And that you are there to help them with. So our titles are pleasantly boring because that's what can go viral.
Well, hello there. Welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I actually have a guest on today who's a friend who has been on once before. Ashley Stahl is her name. And last time she was here, we were talking about her book, which was called U-Turn, Y-O-U, Turn. And she started her career in counterterrorism at the Pentagon in D.C., then went on to become a podcaster, speaker, author, all the things. And since then, so she kind of gave up this big career that she had. It was like a big coaching business after 12 years to launch her agency called Wise Whisper. And now she and her team have written over 100 TEDx talks for clients and placed more than 1,200 clients on stage for TEDx, which is kind of amazing. So all she does now is write and help book people who want to do TEDx talks. So it was super fun having her on because we talked about sort of the anatomy of a good talk. How do you do it? How do you pick the topic? What about the physicality on stage? And just really talked about, in a way, how she got to where she is. But for those of us, even though a lot of people have fear of public speaking, that you really can learn to do it. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Ashley Stahl as much as I enjoyed interviewing her again. I am so excited to welcome back to the Terri Cole Show my pal, Ashley Stahl. Hi, Ash.
I miss you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. I'm so glad that you're here. Lots have changed. We had a great interview the last time you were on.
Yeah.
Talked about all kinds of things, counterterrorism and the Pentagon and all kinds of exciting things in your book that was out then, which was a best-selling book called U-Turn. You get it? Y-O-U Turn. And you have done your own U-Turn since then. And I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, what you're lit up about, how you're helping people with their talks. Let's go. So tell me what you're doing and what inspired the change.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, speaking of my old career in counterterrorism when I was like 23, I ended up getting my first TED Talk at that time, Terri. Like, I went to this award ceremony. I got an award. Yeah. My dad was like so proud. He flew himself across the country. I was like this 20-something, like so excited. This woman walked in the ceremony. She was so beautiful and she just like radiated. Everybody was looking at her. I found out later she's a beauty queen. Like she won, I think, Miss DC or something. But I was like, who are you? You know, and we ended up talking. She said she just had spoke at TEDx UN. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I looked at her. I said, I wish I would be able to do something like that. Like maybe one day. And she looked at me like a little cartoon. She smiled. She goes, I'm sure it's coming, you know? And it was almost like her tooth did the little thing you see in the cartoons, like ching, you know? I heard from her like 2 weeks later. I flew to Istanbul. I was on a work assignment. It was like 2012 protests in Taksim Square. Like, I don't know if anybody follows that kind of political news, but it was really awful at the time. And there was literally a protest happening, and I was staying in a motel, and I was outside, and I moved into a spice bazaar to get cover, and there was like tear gas in my eyeballs, and I get this text buzz on my phone, and I like squint, and I looked at it. She was like, hey, I recommended you for a TED Talk at Berkeley, and they're going to take my referral really seriously. So just heads up for your email. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I have never spoken in my life on a stage, like ever. And this girl has like put herself out there for me. Like, I better not mess this up. So they emailed me, they asked for a speaking reel. I remember thinking like, what is a speaking reel? Like, what even is that? It was 2012. So I looked on my iPhone, like 3, whatever iteration was in 2012 on the Safari, like, what is a speaking reel? And I remember, you know, I was like, okay, I don't have any speaking engagements. So I propped my iPhone against the mirror of the bathroom and I put the curtain behind me as like a backdrop and I gave some horrible speech. Like, I don't even know what I said. And people to this day, they're like, you should look it up. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm scared to go into my email. I think I sent it via like WeTransfer or something that died. Thankfully,
Totally.
I'm like, please tell me that's not alive anymore. But I am so grateful to that version of myself. Like, I can't believe how bold I was. And I got the talk. I don't know how. It was like an act of God. It was almost like, did somebody not see this video? But I went over to some speechwriter in the administration. So it was Obama administration. I was like, okay, I've never spoken before. I'm going to embarrass myself. He gave me some structure. He's like, here's how we write a speech. I took it. I had like panic attacks for 3 nights, got on stage, and I did pretty okay. Like, Guy
I mean, you finished it,
Kawasaki,
right?
I finished it. Yeah, I mean, I did have a couple like downloads when I was there. Like, number one, all the speakers there, I'm thinking at 23, 24 years old, oh wow, I've never done any of this, and these are all these seasoned people, and they were all, bricks is what it looked like. So to me, it
Right.
felt like, okay, you're scared too, like, and you guys are seasoned. So I'm
Right.
20 something. I guess the nerves don't end. And then the only person who wasn't nervous was Guy Kawasaki, who I went on after, which anyone who doesn't know his stuff, he's an early investor in Apple, and just many things he's done. But
Mhm.
he acted like he was at the mall at 2 p.m. on a Friday with his kid. Like, he just walked into that speaking engagement, like, nervous system at zero, no stress. But I went on, and the talk ended up going viral. And I ended up feeling so funny about it, because can you imagine your first try at something like that, just getting out there at that level? And for
Mhm.
years, I felt so weird about it. I felt like proud and grateful, but also weird. Like, you don't want your first stab at something being so seen. You want to hide your first try.
Mhm.
And so I told myself one day I'm going to give another TEDx talk to make good with myself. And I gave another one in 2019. And that one was after I had went to graduate school for psychology, left national security, became a career coach for 12 years, wrote my book we talked about.
Yeah.
And that one went so viral. And what's funny is that nobody watched it for 6 months. It died on the internet.
Mhm.
And then it went viral. Like, and it's so weird because I wrote the talk and thought, this is my best work. Like, I have so much to say here. And
Mm.
I felt like I'm a seasoned speechwriter at this point. I've been a speaker. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And then when it went viral, it was almost like I was expecting it. I'm like, where is it? Why isn't anybody watching this? That's so weird. Like, which I sound like an egomaniac saying that, but I was like, why isn't anybody watching this thing?
Right.
And then it went crazy. And now it's in the top 100 TEDx talks of all time. And
Amazing.
it's the first one got me $1 million of revenue in my coaching practice over the years. The
Mhm.
second one, I got a $500,000 spokesperson deal, over $1 million in coaching clients. And I got a speaking agent. I went on a speaking tour. My keynote fees went from 5K to 30K a talk. Like, it changed my life. So
Mhm.
that's what has led me now to Wise Whisper Agency, where we are a completely done for you agency where we write and book people's TEDx talk. And we have nearly 100% success getting people on stage. Our booking
Wow.
team has booked over 100 TEDx talks because we just don't stop pitching our clients until they get booked, no matter how long it
Yep.
takes. And I'm really proud of it because nothing has helped my career more than this. So this is me now, Terri.
How amazing to it's almost like the reality is like your life changed and then
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, how can I take this and help other people change their lives?" It's interesting. I had hired someone to help me with my book back in the day,
Yeah.
and the first book. And he was like, I probably had 25,000 people following me on Instagram at that point. Like I had been building my brand, but it wasn't like big. And he was like, "You're going to see that there's going to be some dark horses. And it's not about how big someone's audience is. It's about how lit up they are about what you're doing." And I was
Mm.
like, okay, well, that changes it. And you became one of those dark horses
Mm.
in my boundary boss sort of trajectory. And it's interesting being a high functioning codependent, which is what the next book is about.
Mm.
My desire to depend on other people, to ask anyone for anything, to
Mm.
like, it's so hard
Yeah.
to do that. And you were just someone who you asked me to be on your show, and then you were like, "And I want to introduce you to 7,000 people." I was like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
"Okay." You're like, here, you should have Terri on your show. You should have Terri on your show. Like it was so nice, and you were so generous, and I so appreciate it.
Oh.
And it's like you always remember when people do a kindness to
Mm-hmm.
you that they
Mm-hmm.
don't have to. And what I love about you, Ash, is that your is all authentic. It's
Thank you.
like you were doing it. You liked what I was talking about. It was exciting. But for me, being out there, it feels very naked, like in the beginning
Yeah.
of writing, because being a therapist for all these years, you write a book, it gets a lot of visibility and you feel like you're just standing on stage with no clothes on. It's very stressful. And so it
Yeah.
was really helpful. And I appreciated you doing it so I
Oh.
could see this, what you're doing now, because I think you're so good at pitching, helping, supporting.
Mm-hmm.
You turning this into your business, to me, I'm like, it's like
It's,
literally the perfect fit.
it's
So if
funny.
people, because lots of people, they're interested in TEDx, how do you do it? So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, what do you think are the most important things in how to write a TED talk or a speech that will impact people or go viral as yours have many
Yeah.
times?
Gosh, there's so much you just shared that I love. Like, number one, I mean, I love talking about support. Like, I love supporting people that I just think are special. You actually touched on what you were sharing of like, if you look back in your life, I'm a dark horse. And I actually do something like that in our intake form for clients. It's not about the dark horses that like came out of nowhere and got what you were doing, which is
Yeah.
so true. It's almost like you keep putting yourself out there. You better believe there's going to be some dark horses. That's the
Yeah.
secret. You just don't stop and then people see it. And that's why like sometimes when we're at the beginning of our journey, we feel like, wow, we're so small. But it's like, no, you're already the person that's there. There's already people out there that are going to see you. So just keep going. Your job is just for them to see you. But in our intake form for our TEDx clients, we ask, what are 10 moments in your life that were inflection points for you, or people, moments, situations, decisions? How did they change how you think or what's happening for you? And so I think it's really potent that you know like you remember that, like people that made a difference or
Yeah.
moments that made a difference. Obviously, you're a therapist, so you have like all the cognitive ability to like hold those things and desire to
Mhm.
see the value of knowing those things. And as far as like what I'm doing now, I used to tell my therapist all the time because I got a speaking agent from my second TEDx talk with all that
Mhm.
revenue coming in. And I've written like 650 blog posts for like Forbes and all these places. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, a 9-minute talk did more than 600 blogs. Why am I doing all this? Why am I spinning my wheels? And I told my therapist, I wish I could just write these talks and not give them. Like, I wish I could. And now it's like I have this business. And I think often in life, it takes time for elegant ideas to land. And we have
Mhm.
no shortage of many ideas that we could pursue. But, I had an e-course platform with career coaching, and I kept feeling like, oh, I wish I could help people with TED Talks, but that market feels really small of people who already got the TED Talk. And I didn't put it together that I can write it and get it booked for them until later and make it a whole done for
Right.
you service. But as far as why are people coming to us? What is making things go viral? There's so much that can make you go viral. Let's start with the title of any
Mhm.
speech, right? Speeches are like white elephant parties, right? Like you can walk in and there's gifts wrapped and all things considered, you don't really know what's behind them. So you're not going to pick an ugly gift. Like that's all you can work off of.
Right.
So you'll pick one that's nicely wrapped, and that's really what a title is for a speech. And I think that people are way too coy and cute about their titles. We had a psychedelic researcher come to me and say, I want to do this TED Talk with you guys, and I want to call it mushrooms, like eating fungus or something like kind of. I was like, nobody Googles that. Like, that can't be your title. And so we kind of have two approaches to titles. And you want to think the whole time, like, what are people Googling at 3 a.m. when they can't sleep about the thing that they need to know about, right? And that you are there to
Mhm.
help them with. So our titles are pleasantly boring because that's what can go viral, right? So what that means is like, if you are a love expert, it's like how to fall in love. Like that's it.
Yeah.
So if you look at the top 100 TEDx talks of all time, and mine is in there somewhere, mine's called How to Figure Out What You Really Want. And if you look at all the other titles, it's like the art of, the skill of, 3 ways to, how
Yep.
to. So be straightforward with your title. And there's 2 ways to do that. Number one is just what I'm saying. Number two
Mhm.
is the open loop, right? Right. So you could say how to fall in love or the secret to falling in love, the reason why you're
Mhm.
not in love. So you can do an open loop and get people curious that way too. Both of those titles totally work from an SEO perspective. And what I love about TEDx, and I'm proudly not affiliated with TEDx because honestly, that platform does not want entrepreneurs getting on there and making money off of their talks. Like, they don't like that idea. So I'm happily not affiliated with them because I want all the entrepreneurs to get up there and make a legacy out of it, make an impact with it, make some money, like get something happening, create opportunities for yourself. Like, I don't really see it as a TEDx talk. I see it as a YouTube talk, because if you really look at it, people get stuck. They're like, what is my one idea worth spreading? And my answer is, who cares? Like, you don't need one idea worth spreading. What is the best content you have? Because if you really look at TEDx, it's a YouTube talk. YouTube owns the party. TEDx is the bouncer at the door. Like, let's just satisfy the bouncer and get you into the party. So as an agency, when we're writing talks, I'm less curious about what is your message, what is your idea we're spreading, and I'm more curious about, where do you really have something different to say? And I would ask people that in two ways. Number one is, so once we get past the title, so you pick up the present, right? Then it's the opener, because it's like a job interview. I can't remember from my career coaching 15 years moment of, I think it was like 90 seconds or 60 seconds that the recruiter makes a decision about you when they're interviewing you. So it's really the same with keynote speeches, right? Like, and there's different types of openers. One type of opener is conversational. That's a riskier opener to me, but it's an easier opener to write. So what that looks like is dropping a bomb of like a knowledge bomb of like 50% of blah, blah, blah is happening right now. You got people's attention. The problem with that is you need to keep their attention from there. So if you just start chatting about the statistic, they might look down into their iPhones and get bored. You got to keep their attention, right? You got to be interesting. That's why the conversational approach works. We see a lot of researchers doing it. I prefer the storytelling approach. So if you look at my talk in 2019 that went viral, it opens up with my dad getting a phone call that I was kidnapped. And it's like immediate attention. I picked that story. I call that story a cheap shot, and I say it without being insulting because I used it myself, but it's a cheap shot in the sense where like everybody has a crazy story. We have, a stem cell researcher right now. I just looked at his intake form, and he walked away from 2 fatal car accidents without a scratch. He was the only one who survived. So it's like, that's a crazy story that's going to get people's attention. So we could use it. It's going to work. But we have other clients who, this one client comes to mind. She's an energy healer, which is, by the way, a very important line to walk with the TEDx brand, because they don't like anything too spiritual. They don't like new science. So if you're like a doctor and you have pioneer level research, you're going to get yourself pulled off the TEDx channel if you don't walk the line with their guidelines and science very carefully. So same thing with spirituality. So this one came in, and her intake form talked about this embarrassing moment in high school where she was a little bit pudgy, she said, a little, uneasy in her skin. And she said that she went to a party at the popular guy's house, and somebody said to her, oh, he wants to talk to you. She went to the bathroom to get herself all like dolled up. And then she heard through the bathroom door him saying, ew, no, I'm not going to talk to her. She's gross. And to me, that was like, this is just as solid as a cheap shot. And I say that because people think they need to have some crazy story to open up their talk with. And you don't. You need to just be human. And that means you just got to be honest. And just like Martin Scorsese once said, like, what's most personal is the most creative. And people are thirsty for real creativity. They want to hear it. They want to feel it. So I took the cheap shot in my 2019 talk about how to figure out what you want. But a lot of the talks we're writing that are going viral right now that we get booked, they are people who are sharing deeply vulnerable moments from their life that they're kind of embarrassed about, and they're tying it into their content. So that's just the start of like, get your title right, get your opener right, figure out what kind of opener you want. Do you want to do a storytelling opener? Are you going to do a cheap shot and make a crazy story? Are you going to do a deeply vulnerable story? Or are you going to do a conversational opener? I think people who are not natural born writers, they go with the conversational route, because it feels more accessible to be like, isn't this crazy that this is the statistic? Why is this? But I don't think those go as viral most of the time.
Agreed. When you really, well, we know from looking at what does go viral is that storytelling it certainly is a skill, but I also feel like it's something that people can learn how to do. So let's talk a little bit about, so you got your title, you got
Yep.
your, you kind of got your content, and you figured out whether you're doing a deep story, cheap shot, or you're going to be doing conversational. But now let's move into something that a lot of times people say you can't learn, which is stage presence, right?
Yeah.
How do you really own the room and communicate in a way that moves people deeply?
Yeah. Yeah, stage presence is huge. I mean, there's so much more that goes into a speech. Like, we could even talk about the structure, because a lot of people come to me
Hmm.
and they say, "Oh, I don't want to have to memorize a 19-minute speech." And I'm like, "Yeah, why would we? Let's write you a 10-minute talk. That's 3.5 pages. Can you memorize that?" And so
Hmm.
that kind of brings me into stage presence, which is, if you look at the best, highest paid keynote speakers that their whole career is speaking, they've all memorized their keynotes. And one of the biggest mistakes I think speakers make is they say yes to too many topics and they dilute their skill set. They can't really present anything because they're trying to present everything. The best speakers memorize their keynotes, and they don't sell more than 2 or 3 keynotes, right? So if you're out there on the speaking market, people are hiring you, you really offer 2 to 3 talks, and that's it. And you have them well, performed. So stage presence begins with memorization. Like, if you go on stage and you're looking for your words, because your nervous system is going to go haywire, right? Like, you're going to have thousands or hundreds of people staring at you. That's going to make your body have a little crazy dance inside, unless
Right.
you have tools to regulate that. For me, practice breeds confidence. In practice breeds certainty. So if you can memorize your talk enough and have the words autopiloted in your cells, like, you want
Yeah.
them in your cells so much that you can kind of flex and flow and move with it. You want to get to a place where what you have to say is so in there that your mouth can move without you even having to think about what you're saying. So before you even work on your stage presence, you want to have it memorized. If you look at, like, in New York City, I saw Hamilton,
Hmm.
and I was like, I had friends who went on a Friday, I went on a Thursday, and I remember thinking, like, why are people paying the same price for Thursday and Friday? Thursday should be cheaper. And I thought, well, we're paying for performance. We're paying for the same thing. It's consistency.
Right.
There is nothing happening in the Hamilton cast where they're channeling what they're going to say today. And
Right.
I love my friends who can channel, and I have so much support and respect for that. I just think TEDx is not a place to do it. And if you want to be a seasoned speaker, that you're booking X amount of stages a year, that you should be channeling. So that's the first step. Memorize.
Right.
The second step is, like, realize what your body does on a big stage. Like, there's 2 things. Number one, we want to talk faster because we want it to be over. It's subconscious. We're like, the faster we talk, the quicker we're bouncing out of this crazy loony feeling of everybody looking at me. The second thing is, the stage feels so big, it makes us feel so small. So we keep our arms, like, really tied to our sides, and we kind of look like these weird little figurines, versus really letting our arms spread out wide and taking up space on the stage. So I think the first thing to do after you memorize your talk is put slashes in your script on where you're going to pause. And that's something I really learned from studying how Obama spoke when I worked in the administration. I always tell clients, pause until you're uncomfortable, and then pause a little more. That's when your pause is over.
Totally. It's so funny you're saying that about the pausing, because it's so powerful to take that moment. And it's funny. People will always say to me in interviews and stuff, I don't know, you just make me feel so relaxed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I make you feel relaxed because I'm not in a rush.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. That's an energy thing, right? Like, letting people feel like they can ground. I think the second piece of it with, pauses, is that if you're on stage giving a talk about something that you're an expert in, you are sharing things that cognitively they might be the first time anyone's ever heard it. We have to remember,
Right.
TEDx and TED have 40 million subscribers. I tell clients that we book on stage all the time. You have to remember, I mean, there's 13,000 TEDx events and at any given time, maybe there's 2,000 that are active, right? So we're booking people on these things, and I'm
Right.
telling them, I'm like, TEDx has 40 million people following them. And then the TED channel has 40 million. And if you do well on TEDx, you get picked up and thrown onto TED, you get a second wind. So the
Hmm.
amount of people all over the world seeing this, they're not in your bubble, right? Like everything
Right.
from a seasoned corporate executive to like Sally flipping burgers in Iowa right now, like all different stages of their
Yep.
career in life and their psyche. First of all, these talks have to be written at a fifth grade reading level, but they also have to be spoken at that. So, and that might not be the case in your corporate speeches or whatever. We say 115 words a minute, but
Mhm.
calculate for your pauses, right? And you want to put pauses when you introduce a concept that's surprising. When you give people an exercise they need to do, you got to slow your roll. I've seen people get on stage and they're like, all right, close your eyes, everybody. Which, by the way, you don't want to tell an audience to close their eyes. It doesn't feel safe for people. So you might want to say, close your eyes, or if you're not comfortable, fix your gaze, look down. So we always put that in our scripts. But we slow it down, right? It's like people are processing an exercise. So pauses are huge. And so if you can
Mhm.
memorize it and get your pauses, you're already way ahead of the curve. And then
Yep.
the third thing is being a ham. Like you got to really be a ham. So intonation. If you're sharing a conversation with someone else, you want to be a ham. You want to show, like if you look at my 2019 talk, I talk about my dad getting this phone call from these kidnappers, and I do intonation of the kidnappers, like you show us your da da da, like I do their voice. And so you're really, at this point, once you've memorized it, you're not a speechwriter, you're not a speaker.
Mhm.
Now you're an actor. You're moving into
Right.
acting land. And that's why it's funny. People who really want to be well-known speakers, they don't think about all this stuff. They don't think about like the real task of performance, right? Like we
Mhm.
spend 20% of our time writing a talk. We spend 80% practicing it. And the day you give the talk, it's the most boring day of all. You've already practiced. It's test taking day. There's no more studying. You've already memorized all the stuff. You've already practiced
Yep.
how your body moves. So I think intonation is really huge. You know, there's a lot of people that talk about stage blocking, like where are you going to stand? In a 9 to 18, 19-minute talk, you can't fit more than 2 to 3 talking points. I advise clients to like maybe stage block those points, like go in this part of the stage for the first point,
Yeah.
this part's the second point, this part for the third point. And even if you walk across the stage and connect with the whole audience, go back home to that section of the stage that is tied to that talking point. So, I mean, these are just some things. There's so much I could say.
Well, but it's super helpful because I think that just you're really telling us like the anatomy of a good talk. There's a combination of things that we need to do, but I think that what you said in the beginning, which is basically having your clients tell you like 10 pivotal experiences or moments. Again, now we're diving into what's personal for them, because what I find is that when I love the idea of you sharing your kidnapping situation, because again, first of all, people are intrigued by that, but the whole thing about talking about something that's true, not just theoretical, not just numbers, the storytelling aspect is that it has the opportunity to resonate with people, where
Yeah.
you're establishing by starting with a story, you're establishing like a bond
Yeah.
with the audience already, rather than talking at them. It's like you're talking with them.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something why I love the fact that you're doing this with your business. And you guys, all the information for you to find Ash, it'll be in the show notes. But it's that this is something from a therapeutic standpoint that people have a massive fear of public speaking. As we
Yeah.
know this is, they say it's one of the top 3 human fears, which is like crazy.
Yeah.
But it really is. There's something about, I feel like it's hardwired for many of us, but it's also something that you can learn to do. And it's something that you can learn to get over, because what you're doing is you're breaking it down into steps of like, here are the steps. Here are the steps to build it. Here's the physical stuff that you have to just get used to. I remember when I used to teach acting at NYU many years ago, I would do informational interviewing on camera is one of the things that I taught. You know, you would go in for, these kids would go in for auditions and they'd be like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you had every opportunity in that moment to grab a hold of their attention and
Yeah.
not just dutifully answer the question. And people would think they were smiling, but they weren't. And I would do the playback and I'd be like, you have to smile with your eyes, smile with your whole face. It's like a whole thing. And they'd be like thinking that they were doing like a big, huge, crazy smile, and they weren't. And so I think that what you're teaching, the embodiment,
Mhm.
the blocking, the understanding, the acting something out, the using your hands, the being physical, it's sort of like being all in. If you're going to do the talk, you might as well just be all in to actually do it. And these are things, again, I agree so much with what you were saying before, that the more you do it, the more you practice, the easier it gets, the
Yeah.
better it gets, the more fluent you become
Yeah.
in that whole thing. And I think that that's part of it too, but also understanding that you have something to say. If you feel like you do, you do.
Yeah.
So it's believing in that and having sort of faith in that.
Yeah. People feel that. I think a lot of people feel like they're like a wild horse and they're stuck in a stable and there's energy flying through them. They want to run, but they don't even know where they're running. They don't know what they have to say. And those are really fun clients for us because I do feel like everybody has something to say. Not everybody is a content creator. It's interesting from a therapeutic perspective. A lot of clients have come in and said, wow, like this intake form really put me through something. Like I didn't know that
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
have these events in my life that have really influenced me. And we'll look at the events and be like, look, there's this through line throughout all your events of like powerlessness, like this powerlessness you've had from age 7 to now, that's like in these huge events, like
Yeah.
you're like, yeah. And so it's been like, maybe we need to talk about that because you feel like you have a lot of power in you right now. Like, so it is surprising. That's something that people have walked away with that I didn't quite expect because my business hat was so on when I came up, my creative hat, my business hat. I was like, God, like there's nothing that's affected my career like a TEDx talk. Everybody needs one of these. Everybody should do this. And this is such a cool business. I'm going to do it. And now we have tens and ten, we have 50, 40 clients right now that we're writing and booking. And it's just been a rocket, this business. But I never really thought, wow, this is like a deep dive for people to really think about who are they
Oh,
and what do they have
yes.
to say. I mean, I should have thought about it. I don't know why I didn't at all. But what you're saying
But
is
it's
powerful.
amazing. It really is. And the thing is, it also will help people. So if those, you guys, if you're like, yes, I kind of always wanted to do a TEDx, whatever, what you're also saying is that by doing this, you do have to get clear about what your messaging is, about
Mm-hmm.
what is it that you have to say, about what is it that you believe
Yeah.
in yourself, in your life. Because this is what you're really talking about, Ash, is like, this is an inquiry, like a
Yeah.
self inquiry where you're like, okay, and I firmly agree with you. This is not an idea that's worth spreading. I think that all of us have many ideas
Yeah.
that are worth spreading, especially if you're an expert at something, especially if you've had a unique life experience. So for all of those people who really want to learn more about this, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah. We are completely done for you. Your commitment is one intake form, 4 Zoom calls. We on the back end write the whole talk and get it booked, everything from there. So it's at wisewhisperagency.com. And if you say you come from Terri, let me give you $1,000 off within 90 days of this episode release. So please let me know you come from Terri if you do.
Yes, and we'll put all that information in the show notes, you guys. Hey, if you've been waiting for a sign, like I want to do a TEDx, consider this your sign. Thank you, Ash. I love you so much. I'm so glad that you came back. Yay, let's do it again. Let's see each other in real life soon, please.